Hi there, I'm Scott Martin. This is the Bonsai Stuff podcast, and in this episode I'm going to talk a little bit about connection with bonsai and whether we need to have some kind of a link to it, whether it's important to us going forward, how we look after the tree, how we treat it, how we style it, how we maintain it, all that sort of thing. Also want to focus on some winter work techniques because where we are, we've just ticked over the calendar period to be winter in the southern hemisphere. It's getting nice and chilly. There's a cool breeze in the air. There's some snow on the snowfields, so it's time to think about what we have to do during this winter period. And also I want to talk about some needle bonsai techniques. In particular, like obviously it's pine season where I am, and there's been a lot of work with pines, so it's just want to talk about some general housekeeping with regard to that, and also things which will make your life a bit easier when you're dealing with any needled bonsai. So thanks for sticking around, thanks for tuning in, and let's get right into it. Now, as I mentioned in the previous episode of the podcast, I was in involved in a convention in Perth, Western Australia, and there was a couple of other professionals on stage, and one of them from Japan was Masayuki Fujikawa, and lovely fella. If you've got social media, search him out, have a look at what he does. He's a very talented fella. He's in a lot of the Japanese bonsai mags, that sort of thing, and just a really, really lovely fella. Really talented, really knowledgeable. And he had a translator working with him, Adam Webster, who I've known Adam. We've chatted for a long time, but we actually got to meet first time, face-to-face, which is why I love this bonsai conventions and shows and that sort of thing. You get to meet these people that you that maybe chat with online in a virtual world, and finally you get to meet them and see what sort of amazing people they are. Anyway, so Fujikawa-san, he made this comment which I thought was really interesting, obviously via translator, and I'll read it to you. I've written it down because at the time I thought, wow, that's really important. It's working on bonsai as a collaboration between us and nature. So I'll just let that sink in for a second, and it struck a chord with me because it took me to another level, thinking about, yeah, we are working within constraints. You know, I call them horticultural constraints. He talks about it with nature, and when he was designing or working on this, doing this demonstration on this Melaleuca, this saltwater paperbark, Cuticularis, he was talking about going for a certain feel for the tree, and it got tilted to one side and became a windswept. And he was talking about how the tree would grow if the wind was blowing from a certain side. And so his whole design philosophy and approach on this particular tree was looking at how this tree would grow in nature. So it took on a really natural feel to it. And, there was a branch fighting against the wind, but wasn't that strong because the tree would naturally want to push a branch that way, but it just wouldn't do very well because of the way the wind was blowing. And anyway, I thought it was really interesting to look at designing bonsai from that perspective, and it takes me to the next level, which is where I want to get to with this part of the podcast. And it talks about the connection, or I think it's about the connection you have with your bonsai. And a lot of people think about trees and say, oh, this one, it's been struck by lightning and it's got this on it and it's died back, and it's there's got to be a story behind the bonsai. Or, more dramatic, a bear's been scratching on, the bark on this one and it's done this and it's done that. Or, this one had a tree fall down beside it and it killed this side of the tree, and whatever it is. And while I personally don't necessarily look to design my bonsais from the artistic side of things to tell a tale, to tell a story, to go, okay, now, all right, this juniper, it's growing high on a mountain. The wind blows across here every day at approximately 50 kilometres an hour, and there's this and there's that, and this branch has died off, and then suddenly an eagle's landed on this one and made a nest. Whatever it is, I'm being being a bit over the top with it. But I don't necessarily design my bonsai that way, and I look for, as I've said before, I sort of look for what's in the bonsai already, and I try and accentuate that. I try and work with what the tree's got, and rather than fighting the tree to fit a purpose or a story that I'm trying to tell. And it comes down to this connection. And for me, it's almost vital, or like one of the most important things that can happen with me with my bonsai is to have that connection with the tree. And this is where it gets really hard to be independent or to make the tough decisions, because you get this connection with this tree that you are watering, multiple times a day. You are spending time with it every single day, or you should be. You're fertilizing it, you're spraying it, you're buying beautiful pots for it, you're making sure you've got bonsai soil for it, you're planning the future, you're putting wire on this thing, you're opening it up, you're making it stronger, and you're building this relationship. Like, this connection is growing and growing every single day, and it gets harder and harder to make the tough decisions on what should be removed, what should be cut back, and suddenly this thing starts getting longer and longer and longer. Anyway, but I want to come back to this point about this collaboration between nature and the bonsai artist, and the connection that we build, and how those three things are really important, and it could be seen as the missing piece of the puzzle in your own bonsai journey. If you go back and look at trees that maybe you don't have a connection with, what will make you get that connection? What will allow you to do that, and to build that love for that tree, and put it on a path and develop it to make it one that you really have an affinity with, that you've got that connection with. And I think that working with nature can be one of those things. I look at some trees that I've got, and a big melaleuca that I've got that I just love, and it reminds me of my childhood. Riding my push bike down the street and seeing these nature strip trees that we have around where I grew up, and it looks like one of those. And that's, in my mind, that's me working with a connection with that tree, but also with nature, because that's how the tree naturally grew, and that's what I've styled it to be, and that's allowed it to stay nice and strong. So I think that if you can keep that in the back of your mind, as Fujikawa was saying, it's the collaboration between us and nature that allows us to build that connection that might be really important and missing for you in your bonsai journey. Great comment. I love it. Hadn't thought about it like that before, although that's what we do, and I think that it's something just to put a bit of thought into. Right, so now back to some of the horticultural stuff that's really important, and I've talked about this before, and I'll talk about it again, and it's just one of those things to reaffirm for us, when you're doing work on your pines in particular, and that's where this came from, because I've been plucking needles on pines till my hands cramp lately. It's been a really busy time, and following the simple guideline that I do, that one branch every year divides into two. So it means that you're doubling your growth on that tree every single year, and where there was 400 buds, there's up towards sort of 800 buds now on that tree. So it's really important not to take on too many trees, because what's achievable now, suddenly you have to put twice as much time into next year, and it can grow out of control really, really quickly. Anyway, so what I wanted to come back to and talk about was the importance of sunlight and airflow with our bonsai. And as the trees go to dormancy, the deciduous trees go to dormancy, it's really a nice time to start working on your pines and making sure that they've been needle plucked and bud select. So where we've decandled last year in summer, we've got massive buds that have come out of any one area, keeping in mind that guideline of 1 to 2. You don't want any more than 2 buds at any one spot. Sometimes when it gets to be too dense, you really want to come back to 1 bud. So you want to go through and you start scissor work and removing these excess buds, and you're plucking the old needles to come towards the new ones, right? And the reason for that is, one, it makes it look beautiful, makes it look really, really pretty. But secondly, it allows for sunlight and air to get into those inner areas. And this is just a general public service announcement for everybody involved. The reason why we do that is to let in the sunlight, let in the airflow, which then stimulates backbudding in those inner areas. And if you think about a pine branch, and I'm talking about pine for now, but it can apply to so many different varieties. When you think about the structure on a pad to get volume on it, step one, as I've talked about, it's the flat pancake, right? So it's the plate where it's really round and really soft and flat. Second layer comes and sits on top of that, like a cake, like a layer of a cake sitting on top of it, right? And what happens is, if you put your hands out to the side and to the right hand side, put your right hand out like just flattened. Then put your left hand over the top of that, but come back, rather than having your fingertips level, come back, maybe 4 or 5 centimeters, right? That's the layer cake that you're producing for your pads. And what's going to happen is your lower hand, your right hand, the part of the pad that sticks out furthest, is going to continue extending, going to keep growing out further and further, right? So if you move your right hand now out about 5 or 10 centimeters, you'll get the gist of what's going to happen with your pads. Even though they might look beautiful now, in a year's time, 2 years' time, that pad's going to start getting too long, right? So what we've got to do is we've got a couple of options, because the top pad, your left hand, is also going to keep extending, right? So the overall silhouette of your bonsai is going to keep extending and getting larger. So the options we've got are, one, we cut back the tips and we go back to buds that are prior to that point on the pad. And that all sounds great in theory, but where your left hand is sitting on top of it is shading that part of the pad. So the lower part of the pad is being shaded by the upper part of the pad, and that's how we build volume. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're removing enough mass of needles or foliage or whatever it is that's creating that shade to allow sunlight to come into that lower section of the pad. If you don't, you won't get back budding, which means that as the pad gets too long, there's nothing to cut back to. And it's absolutely vital with needle variety bonsai to have that back budding to allow you to push it back. The other option you've got is completely remove the lower section of the pad, so your right hand gets cut out, then your left hand drops down to take the place of where the lower pad was. All right, but that takes us backwards too far, because now we've only got the flat saucer. We don't have the volume. We need another hand in there. We need some extra layer of growth to give us our pad volume. And that comes from back budding on the top layer of the pad, which we can then wire down and shape to give us our volume. So another hand comes in to fill that section of the pad. So it creates these layers, and the layers keep dropping down, and the next one keeps replacing it and keeps pushing it. So we can maintain the silhouette on a bonsai without it continuously extending, and maintain the integrity of our design that we wanted. You don't have to always redesign stuff as the pad gets too long. You've just got to have a point to cut back to. How do you get a point to cut back to? Sunlight and airflow, the two most important things that you've got to have with your design on the tree. When do we do it? For black pines, red pines, it's in autumn and winter. You can also do it in decandling time. So if you don't get time to do it at this point of the year, don't flog yourself silly, but understand that it's going to delay that onset of those buds that we need that are further back in. And as I said, I was taught that one of the golden rules of one of the secrets of bonsai when I was studying in Osaka at Koken was inner buds. And I come back to it every single time that I work on any bonsai in my entire life now. And that thought stays with me. At the time, it was yep, okay, that's great, thanks very much, makes sense. But it's so important, and it's a time to have it sort of push back to the forefront of your mind, that when you're working with your bonsai, yeah, sure, we love that artistic side. We want them to look magnificent. We want them to be beautiful. But we want it to be an ongoing process, right? This isn't just for now. This is for the future. This is forever. These things are going to outlast us hands down if we look after them properly, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them and continually putting in place strategies to allow us to maintain the integrity of the design or the intent of the design that we wanted. And that comes from sunlight getting in there, activating those back buds, making sure that we've got something to bring the layer cake back to, so we don't keep extending beyond the design or the length of the branch that we want to get. And it's a hard one to get your head around at first, but once you start seeing how it works, then you become surprised by it. You know, it's easy when you first not easy, but it's common when you first make that flat pancake of the pad that you sort of can be saying, okay, well, that's it now, but then what happens? Like, this is just going to keep extending. And then you'll, look at photos on online, or you'll look at a book, or you'll go to a show and you'll sort of see how the layers are created where, some of those branches you've got spread left and right to create the saucer can sort of be wound back in a little bit to give you some depth and create that second layer of the cake for your pad as well. But then it's as you go through this yearly process, this maintenance process, that's when you start seeing it going, oh, wow, I didn't think these things would backbud, They do. They backbud on newer wood, which is why it's really important you don't let this stuff go, because the older that wood gets, the more bark that it creates, the less chance you've got of backbudding happening at all. So you need to be Johnny on the spot and make sure that you are vigilant with it, and that you're doing the cleaning that we have to do, and doing the maintenance with the intent of getting these inner buds to continue the design. Needle variety bonsai are amongst some of my favourite. I love lots of different varieties, lots of different species. Australian natives are fantastic, but I do a lot of work, and I do appreciate and I do love a lot of needle variety bonsai. And I just wanted to run through again as a bit of a reminder, and just talk about good technique when you're working with needle variety bonsai. And one of those things is that I use as a golden rule, or a how do I know I'm doing this right or wrong? If you feel yourself getting pricked by the needles, you're doing it wrong. Well, you're not doing it as well as what you possibly could be. All right. So when you're working with black pines, obviously it's that time of year which prompted me to bring this up, was work with pines, and I find that as I get more tired, as I get a bit run down, or as I've been working a long time doing the same thing. Same with anybody. You get a bit lax with it. You get a bit slack on how you handle things, how you put wire on a tree, how you prune, and maybe it's not done to the best of your ability. So it's time for that rest. And one trigger that I use is when I work with pines is to make sure that I get as fewer pricks as possible from the needles. And sometimes it's unavoidable. Like if you're doing initial rough styling, or heavy styling on a pine, and you're not too worried about the structure of the tree, you're just trying to set some major branches. Yeah, of course you've got to get your hands in there, and you're doing some major stuff, so you will get pricked. But the idea is that the least spikes that you get from the tree, the least damage you're potentially doing to the tree. So forget about those little red dots you're going to get over your hand, and they're going to sting for about 24 hours afterwards, and every time you hop in the shower you're going to scream like a bloody 3-year-old. Think about it more from the point of view that when you're working on those species and you're rough with them and you get spiked and you break those needles, you're doing damage that is avoidable, right? So normally you see it with a black pine that if you're working on it this month, next month you'll go out there and you'll see all these broken tips on the pine. And I get messages sent to me, and people ask me, "Hey, what's going wrong? Is it needle cast? Is it this? Is it that? Is it tip blight? Whatever? Is there some kind of fungal issue?" And when you zoom in and have a look at it, you'll actually see the break point where the needle is actually snapped. And some of these a lot of the new needles that you've got on your pine are very delicate. Stuff that's grown from decandling last December or last summer to now you'll find that it's very delicate. And if you're a bit too rough with it, you sort of jam your hands in there to make cuts or to, pluck needles or something like that, then you'll find that you'll break the tips on them really easy. And if you've been rough with them in the past and you start working on the tree now, you'll see all those broken little tips on the new needles. So it's good practice to stop yourself. And for me, it's when I feel myself starting to get pricked, stop and go, okay, am I doing this the right way? And don't forget that when you're working with any needle variety, work the pad or the area from underneath coming up. So you're working in the same direction, or you're flowing through the branch the same direction the needles are growing. Right? So if you come in from the top down, you're fighting or you're working against the way the needles are growing on that tree, whether it's a cedar or whether it's a pine of some kind, Scots pine, whatever it is. So you've got to work underneath the branch, working your way through to get to the point that you want. And for me, it's always, I start getting spiked when I get tired because I start forgetting or start becoming a bit lax with how I'm treating the tree, and I don't come from underneath. I start coming from the top down. Like, it's just bad habit that you sort of get tired and start working, going to put wire on a tree and you go, yep, straight in from the top. It's like, hang on a minute, can't do that, mate. Stop, you're starting to break needles. And often that's when I'll pull the pin and I'll come back to it the next day and go, yep, let's get into this thing fresh, because these little bits of damage that you're doing to the bonsai, to the needles, it's the 1%ers. That's what stacks up over time. That's what, gradually the tree gets a bit weaker or whatever. And it's just not, it's not the best that you can possibly do. And if it's not the best you possibly can do, then really you're giving the bonsai the best chance possible to, maybe it's going to, I'm exaggerating, but maybe it's going to allocate resources to the area that you've broken, as opposed to pushing out a new little bud on a branch somewhere where you'd love a new part of that pad to develop. As we talked about earlier, that's, it's the ultimate, what we want to aim for. But also it's bloody unsightly. It looks terrible when you look at your pines and you see all those broken little tips on them, and that always comes from rough handling. So it's just a nice reminder that up and under with your needle varieties, work in the flowing direction of the needle, and if you feel yourself starting to get spiked or pricked, then stop it. The last part that I want to talk about when it comes to this work with needle variety bonsai, and specifically talking about black pines at the moment, because that's all that's on my mind. That's all I'm working on, basically, is getting through this needle plucking, bud selecting, wiring, taking wire off, needle plucking, bud selecting, wiring, taking wire off, is needle slip. Now, this happens also when you get a bit tired, but also the main reason for it is we use pine tweezers, right? Now, pine tweezers are, for me, they're a variety which are nice and heavy duty, and they've got a rounded, long grip tip on them. I don't like the fine tip ones that are too fine, because you can actually start cutting the needles rather than grabbing them, and that's why I like the sort of more rounder ones with a lot of teeth on there, a lot of grip, and they can grab the needles and they can pluck it out. And you don't forget, you pluck in the direction the needles are growing. You don't tear against the grain, because you'll do damage to the branch, but you're plucking in the direction that the needles are growing. And I love my pine tweezers because they allow you to get a good firm grip on these things, pluck them out. It's nice and easy, and you can do it really, really quickly. When you get proficient at it, at the start slowly. Just work on good technique, grabbing them, pulling in the direction of the needle growth. If you find the needle stuck, grab one needle at a time and pluck them out that way. But then slowly over time, you'll get faster and faster and faster. And it's like, you'll be plucking out these needles, and it can go relatively quickly when you've got the technique down pat. But what happens is with your tweezers, that grippy part at the tip, because you're grabbing something which is full of juice, full of sap, right? And you're plucking it and you're squeezing as you do it, gradually there gets to be a build-up on the tips of the tweezers. You see it on your scissors when you're pruning, right? You get that little bit of black sap build up, and the scissors don't work quite like they should. So then you get out the rust cleaner, you clean it off, give them a bit of a sharpen, and back you go. And it's like chalk and cheese. One's working beautifully, the other one's sort of smashing its way through, and it's not cutting as good as what it should be. And if you're on a variety like an elm of some kind, like Chinese elm or English elm, when you get that bit of a sap build up, you'll find that your cuts don't go through the branch quite so neatly. They sort of smash their way through and you're left with a bit of string, and it's like stop, clean, sharpen, back to it. Tweezers are exactly the same. Now, that sap build up that you get in there can be a bit of a bugger to get rid of, and your rust cleaner doesn't actually get into those grooves. So I was shown a technique, and that's what I want to talk about today, and this thing I use all the time. I love it. It's bloody brilliant. So, the little flame torches you can get for cooking, right? You buy at most hardware stores and you get little gas refills for them, or even a cigarette lighter. That'd be fine. Anything that's going to hold a flame there. I use my little blowtorch. With it, I've got two. I've got a large one for big burning on deadwood, but I've got also a small one, which is I'm holding my fingers up now in front of the mic, and it's about, 10, 12 centimetres tall, something like that. So it's really like just to fit in the palm of your hand, but it gets a nice, really specific, sharp flame on it. And what you do is you take your tweezers, keeping your hands back, of course, and you burn the grip area of the tweezers, and you'll see that the build-up, the sap build-up in there suddenly goes from being greeny colour to red as it catches on fire, right? You do that on both of them, and then you get a wire brush and you brush the burnt sap out of the tips, and voila, in about 20 seconds, not even that, you've got tweezers which are back to pristine condition, which you'll feel it. If you've been grabbing needles and it's been slipping, like you think, hang on, I've got a good hold on that, it's not coming out, stop, have a look at the grip area on your tweezers, because I guarantee it's going to be full of crap, and you'll need to do this burn off and then a wire brush. Last tip I'll give you, that tip on the tweezers gets bloody hot, don't burn your fingers, but also don't use it until it cools down, because you'll start burning the tree. So just go a bit easy with it. That's from personal experience. I was told, watch out, the tip of those tweezers are going to be hot. And it's like, yeah, really, how hot? I might just check and burn the tip of my fingers. So don't be stupid. Don't do what I did. And just go easy with it. But needle slip, how you can work out if you've had needle slip from your tweezers is you come back, a period after you've been doing the work. So for me, it's decandling's the next time I work on my pines. And you'll see these needles in there that have got like these burn marks along them in straight lines, and there's a bit of green and there's a bit of brown, and it sort of looks like it goes up most of the length of the needle. That's tweezers slipping on the needle, so it's needle slip, right? And you see it all the time. I see it on my trees now too. So it's just that as I start to feel that slipping, stop, get your little blowtorch, burn the tip of the tweezers, use a wire brush it out of there. They're back to brand new. It's the easiest way. I've seen, and I've tried with boiling water. Just doesn't seem to get it all out of there. I've tried it just with a wire brush, but then your wire brush gets all the sap on it as well. This burning it slightly and making it sort of flake off, if you like, and then just giving it a quick brush works like an absolute treat. So hopefully that helps you avoid needle slip when you're working with your needle variety bonsai. Okay, so I want to finish this podcast with a section sort of reflecting a bit on what was brought up last week, which from the feedback has really struck a chord with a lot of people, which warms the cockles of my heart. It's very, very nice to know that people feel so strongly about kindness in bonsai and the Bonsai Love and all that stuff, because it is so easy to feel like you've been cut down and to carry the weight of a comment from somebody or a thought or whatever it is. And I know that I say it's water off a duck's back, let it go. Don't worry about it, doesn't matter. I say that stuff, but then I personally have had someone not say anything disastrous, but they made a comment about something that I'd done indirectly, not to me, but in another format, and I read it and I sort of took it to heart and I went, hang on a minute, I bloody love that. Like I've put my back into that thing and I think it's awesome. And I'm certain that the author or the person who wrote the comment didn't mean ill intent. It was just like a bit of a throwaway comment about, that someone, another professional said that they would have done this and not that. And it's like I looked at it and I thought, I stewed on that thing all night. and I didn't tell my loved ones about it. But I read this comment stupidly late at night before going to bed, which is probably the worst time to be on your device, and it stuck with me, and it sat and it weighed heavily on me all that night. And it's one of those things that I kept saying to myself, it doesn't mean anything, be proud of what you've done, and you've done a good job, and all that self-assurance stuff. And stuff that I talk about in the podcast and stuff that I say to people, but I know that these sort of throwaways can take a toll and have an impact because they do it on me. And I work with trees all the time, and I put myself out there a lot. I put up posts, and I encourage people to think about, do you like the pot? Do you like the branch structure? Do you like whatever? Because I don't put up things online to say, hey, tell me how good I am. It's like, I want to make everyone's day a bit brighter by spending your time looking at beautiful bonsai, but also to encourage the thought process, not in a negative way, but in a really positive way. And I understand that, and I feel it when things, sort of maybe take a turn or something like that. It is, and it can be harsh on you. And I just wanted to sort of reflect on that. My own personal experience, which has happened throughout my whole bonsai life. It's not just something new. I take these things on very heavily, which is why I suppose I'm such an advocate for us being really mindful about what we say and about how we act and about what we do, because it has an impact. You might not think it does, and a throwaway comment as you walk past someone, about terrible root structure on a tree, or poor soil, or whatever, that can have an impact. And you just need to be mindful that it's going to. And if you know it's going to and you still do it, then you're not my people. That's that's not what this is about. We're about encouragement. We're about uplifting. We're not about knocking down. I get people coming to my workshop that say, be honest with me. Tell me what's wrong with it. And it's like, okay, so I really like this and I really like that, and I think this part's a feature. It's like, no, don't tell me what you like. Tell me what you hate. It's like, well, I don't do it that way. That's not what. How's that going to help? And I would never look at a tree that way. One thing I get asked all the time is, if this doesn't have potential, I'm putting it in the bin. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to move it on. Does it have potential? And I don't think I've ever said, no, it doesn't have potential, because there's always something with a plan, with the correct procedure, with the correct path. That path might be 20 years, or it might be, 2 years, or it might be 2 months, whatever it is. With the correct planning and path, we can get past these hurdles, and we can develop beautiful bonsai. And every single tree that we decide to make a bonsai deserves 100% input on it, because that's the life we've chosen for us. So we need to be mindful as custodians that we look after it so it lasts forever, right? But I want to come back to these comments and subtle sort of insinuations or sniggers or whispers or something like that. That has a massive impact, and I just strongly encourage you to be really mindful that the shoe's on the other foot. And I don't care how good you are, and if you deem yourself an expert or like me, I'm a bonsai professional. By all means, I don't put myself in the category of being best in the world, but I like to think that I've got good intent with what I do, and I really like what I produce, which is what it's about. But subtle little comments or anything behind the scene can have a really disastrous impact on someone that you might not intend it, but it just does sort of, if it's not necessary. All right. So come back to the Bonsai Love, be encouraging, be uplifting, look for positives in every single part of every single bonsai that you ever come across, and think about it from the point of view that bonsai could mean so much to somebody else, and a flippant little walk past comment is unnecessary and quite hurtful. So let's all stay on the right side of the ledger and stay really positive. Well, you made it to the end of another podcast. Thank you. If you're still listening, if you haven't put me on double speed to get to the end of this thing and wrap it up and move on to whatever. No, I'm just joking. Thank you for sticking around as always, and please keep reaching out. You know how to do it now. There's lots of people do, and I always get back to you. If I don't, subtle reminder, hey, Scott, you haven't got back to me. No worries. That doesn't upset me in the slightest. And, I love spending the time. Hey, I was at in Perth at this convention. And, I'd finish on stage, I'd get a 2-second break, I'd get off, get my phone, start answering questions, get back, keep working. Seriously, I love it. It keeps me motivated, keeps me focused, that I keep the bonsai wheels turning around the world, no matter where you are and what it's about. So, yeah, keep reaching out. And also look at, as I talked about earlier in the podcast, look at that connection with your trees. And it's lovely that you've got the connections, but I encourage you, when you don't have a connection with a tree, try and build one. Try and make that connection. Try and make it something that it's, for me, a lot of the connection comes with the excitement of the path. It's not necessarily where the tree's at right now, but it's where it's going to get to next, and where it's going to get to after that, and where it's going to get to after that. And you sort of build this roadmap. That's when I have the connection with the tree to go, yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to repot you, and I'm going to bloody love you within an inch of your life, because if I keep doing the right things, this path that we're on, how exciting is it going to be when we get to the end one? Who knows when it is, but we're on the path. So build that up. And also think about that comment about us as bonsai artists, as bonsai practitioners, and whether you see yourself as an artist or not, you are. If you've got bonsai, then you're an artist. Think about that connection between nature and us as you're working with the trees. Doesn't have to have a story. Lovely if it does. Don't force one. Don't make it if you don't need to. It can just be a piece of art that you love within horticultural constraints, and just enjoy the time that you've got with your trees. Make sure that as you walk around the yard this week, until next week's podcast, you give all your trees a bit of a cuddle for me and tell them that I think they're doing great and you're doing awesome as well. Just keep at it, stay on the path, and stay focused. Until next time, happy bonsai.